There is a specific moment, usually occurring in the dead silence of 3 a.m., when the exhaustion hits you differently. It isn't just tired bones or a weary mind. It is a vibrating, nauseating hum in the center of your chest. You feel heavy, not with your own weight, but with the accumulated debris of everyone else's emotions. You have spent your entire life as the emotional trash can for your family, your partner, and your colleagues. You anticipate their needs before they speak them. You smooth over conflicts you didn't start. You swallow your own rage to keep the peace, becoming a chameleon that shifts colors to make everyone else feel comfortable, safe, and heard. But lately, something has shifted. That warm, fuzzy instinct to help has curdled into a cold, terrifying indifference. You look at the people you supposedly love, and for a fleeting second, you feel absolutely nothing. Or worse, you feel a sharp, surgical desire to dismantle them. You are terrified of this feeling. You think it makes you a monster, a narcissist, or a sociopath. You worry that your empathy, the one trait you were told was your greatest virtue, has finally burned out, leaving behind a hollow shell. Whatever you think this is, you are wrong. This is not a breakdown. This is not depression, and it certainly isn't the end of your empathy. What you are experiencing is a biological and psychological failsafe that Carl Jung identified decades ago, though he used the language of alchemy and myth rather than biology. You are entering a phase I call the empathic event horizon. It is the point where the gravity of your own suppressed shadow becomes so strong that it collapses the persona of the nice person, forcing a radical restructuring of your psyche. You aren't losing your mind, you are upgrading it. To understand why this is happening, we must first dissect the machinery of your suffering using the dual lens of Jungian analytical psychology and modern neuroscience. For years, you have operated under what neuroscientists call hyperactive mirror neuron engagement. Mirror neurons are the brain cells that allow us to replicate the emotions of others within our own neural pathways. When someone cries, your brain lights up in the exact same regions as theirs. You don't just understand their pain, you run a simulation of it. In a balanced individual, this simulation is brief. But for you, the boundaries are permeable. You lack the psychic skin to keep the simulation separate from your reality. Jung described this state not as a virtue, but as a dangerous, unconscious identification, a state of participation mystique where you are psychically fused with your environment. You absorb cortisol, the stress hormone, from others as if you were chemically addicted to their crises. You have become a dialysis machine for the collective unconscious of your social circle, filtering their toxicity through your own blood. However, evolution is not wasteful. It does not design a creature to suffer indefinitely without a purpose. The sudden coldness you feel, that flash of dark rage, or the sudden ability to cut someone off without looking back, is your brain's prefrontal cortex finally overriding the primitive limbic system. It is engaging a mechanism I define as strategic emotional severance. Jung warned that no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. You have spent your life reaching for heaven, trying to be the healer, the saint, the good listener. Now, your roots are violently forcing their way down into the hell of your own shadow. This is where the revenge begins. It is not revenge in the petty, vindictive sense. It is the revenge of the self against the persona. It is the moment the victim realizes they hold the keys to the psychological kingdom. Consider the paradox. The person who knows exactly how to heal a wound also knows exactly where to slide the knife to cause the most damage. The empath and the manipulator share the exact same skill set: high emotional intelligence, acute observation, and the ability to read micro-expressions. The only difference is intent. When you stop using these skills solely to serve others, you do not become evil. you become dangerous in the most necessary way. You become capable of the shadow mirror effect. This is the transition from being a passive sponge to becoming an active mirror. Instead of absorbing the toxicity, you reflect it back to its source with terrifying precision. Jung observed this dynamic in his study of the wounded healer. He realized that the only way to truly help someone, and to save oneself, is not to drown in their chaos, but to stand on the shore and describe the water. But to get to the shore, you have to stop swimming for them. Let's look at the neuroscience of this revenge. When you operate in your default victim mode, your brain is flooded with oxytocin and dopamine whenever you please someone, reinforcing the slavery. But when the empathic event horizon is crossed, your neurochemistry shifts. Your brain begins to prioritize self-preservation. The coldness you feel is actually the sensation of your emotional boundaries hardening. It is the feeling of your ego finally differentiating itself from the mass. Jung argued that this differentiation is the primary goal of human existence, a process he called individuation. But individuation is not a peaceful meditation under a Bodhi tree. It is a civil war. It requires you to integrate the very things you have spent your life running from: your capacity for aggression, your selfishness, your desire for power. The empath who refuses to integrate their shadow is doomed to be a victim forever, eventually developing autoimmune disorders or chronic fatigue as the body attacks itself because the mind refuses to attack the oppressor. But the empath who accepts the invitation of the shadow becomes something else entirely. They become a psychological mastermind. This is not hyperbole. By understanding the hidden motives of others through years of forced observation, and now combining that with the cold detachment of the shadow, you gain the ability to predict behavior with uncanny accuracy. You stop reacting to the drama and start deconstructing the scriptwriter. To illustrate this metamorphosis, we must examine a specific archetype that Jung encountered frequently in his clinical practice, the figure of the devouring mother, or the martyr. However, let us modernize this into a case study of a specific persona we will call the architectural savior. This is likely who you have been for most of your life. The architectural savior builds their entire identity around being the structural support for others. They believe that if they just love hard enough, explain clearly enough, or sacrifice enough, the chaotic people around them will stabilize. Jung would look at this behavior and identify it immediately as a form of unconscious inflation. You believe you are powerful enough to fix fate, but the universe has a way of correcting inflation through humiliation. The revenge phase usually triggers after a specific betrayal, a moment when the people you saved turn around and crucify you. This shock is necessary. It shatters the delusion that you are the savior, leaving you in the rubble of your own naivety. And it is here, in the rubble, that the true work begins. The neuroscience of betrayal trauma shows that it deactivates the trust centers of the brain and hyperactivates the analytical centers. You stop feeling and start scanning. You begin to see the patterns you missed. You realize that your empathy was not a gift to them, it was a drug you supplied. And like any dealer, you have the power to cut the supply. This brings us to the classification of your transformation. You are currently moving through distinct stages of neuroevolution. If you can identify where you are on this map, you can stop fighting the current and let it carry you to the master status. Jung didn't create a list for this specific modern malaise, but by synthesizing his work on alchemy with behavioral psychology, we can identify 4 distinct phases of the empath's transmutation. The first phase is what I call the somatic rebellion. This is where your body says no before your mind does. You might find yourself physically unable to pick up the phone when a certain person calls. You might develop migraines, sudden fatigue, or a choking sensation in the throat, the globus hystericus. Jung viewed somatic symptoms as the unconscious trying to speak when the conscious mind refuses to listen. Your body is rejecting the parasite. If you ignore this phase, the symptoms will simply migrate to a more critical system. You cannot outthink your nervous system. It knows you are being hunted even if you tell yourself you are just being supportive. The second phase is the void of apathy. This is the phase that scares you the most. It is the sudden inability to care about the things that used to define your existence. The drama of your friends feels boring. The crises of your family feel repetitive. You feel detached, like you are watching your life through a pane of thick glass. In Jungian terms, this is the Nigredo, the blackening. It is the decomposition of the old ego. You feel dead because the version of you that existed to please others is dying. Neuroscience tells us that during this phase, your dopamine receptors are down-regulating. You are going through withdrawal from the validation of being needed. It feels like depression, but it is actually a detox. You are being stripped clean. This leads us to the most dangerous and powerful phase, the third stage, which I have termed the weaponization of insight. This is the turning point. This is where the victim dies and the strategist is born. This is where the victim dies and the strategist is born. You have spent years analyzing how people manipulate each other, how they project their insecurities, and how they weaponize guilt to control you. Now, that immense library of unconscious data is being moved to the conscious mind. Your primary tool becomes the psychological dissection lens. You no longer feel their anger, you observe the mechanism of the projection. You see their shame bubbling up and disguising itself as aggression toward you. You recognize the classic Jungian shadow projection in real time. Where you once absorbed their fury and internalized it as your fault, you now see it as a mechanical failure on their part. This is not coldness, it is profound psychological literacy. The mastermind quality emerges not from malice, but from the realization that you can accurately predict and therefore neutralize the attack. You see the punch coming an hour before the fist even clenches. This period can be morally challenging. You possess the power to exploit the weaknesses you observe simply because you know them intimately. This is the ultimate test of individuation. Jung often wrote about the integration of the shadow and the concept of enantiodromia, the tendency for things to turn into their opposite. The extreme light of your past empathy has swung violently into the extreme darkness of this diagnostic insight. Your challenge now is to hold the tension of these opposites, the deep understanding of the empath and the surgical detachment of the mastermind. To succeed, you must learn to utilize the insight without activating the old, destructive rage of the victim. The final and highest stage of this transmutation is the selective empathic immunity. This is the state of balance, the rubedo, the reddening or the crowning achievement of the alchemical process. In this phase, you are no longer defined by the chaos of others. Your nervous system is recalibrated. The mirror neurons are still active, you can still understand pain, but the circuit breaker is now functional. You have gained control over the sympathetic resonance. This state is characterized by several things. Firstly, you develop psychic distance. When someone brings their crisis to you, you see the emotion, but you do not feel the accompanying cortisol spike in your own body. You observe their suffering as a complex, detached problem set, not a shared experience. You can offer clear, rational help without being dragged into the emotional undertow. Your boundaries are now not walls, but one-way mirrors. You can see out clearly, but they cannot see in to drain your resources. Secondly, you gain what Jung called consciousness of the autonomous psychic factor. You realize that the feelings you were so overwhelmed by were often not your own, but autonomous complexes projected onto you. For example, if someone in your life constantly felt inadequate, they projected the inadequacy complex onto you, and you, the empathic sponge, mistakenly took it on, believing you were inadequate. Now, you see the complex for what it is, an independent entity living within them, not within you. This realization dissolves the victim identification entirely. The mastermind uses this high-level understanding of the psyche to navigate the world. They understand that most human conflict is not personal. It is the collision of unconscious complexes. They stop taking things personally because they grasp the mechanics of projection and inflation so acutely. When someone attacks them, they don't feel hurt. They feel diagnosed. They recognize the attacker's shadow reaching out, starved for attention. This insight is your ultimate defense. Jung himself had to manage this power. He was an intense empath who could perceive the psychic state of his patients to a frightening degree. His solution was to develop a rigorous personal mythology and a strict adherence to the process of individuation, which served as his anchor. Your own anchor must be the realization that your true power lies not in fixing others, but in the absolute sovereignty of your own inner landscape. This journey transforms the former victim from a person who sought approval into a person who seeks authentic authority. It is an authority built not on external power or title, but on the profound, hard-won knowledge of the human shadow, both your own and others. The revenge is complete when you realize that the greatest power you have is the power to withdraw your emotional engagement entirely and to choose exactly who and what deserves the exquisite, rare gift of your empathy. Do not mistake this mastery for aloofness or withdrawal from the world. True mastery is an act of supreme engagement, but one conducted on your terms, from a position of integrated strength. You are no longer serving their needs, you are serving your own highly conscious purpose. The challenge now is to sustain this balance. The shadow, once integrated, does not disappear. It becomes a constant internal partner. You must treat it with respect, listening to its insights, the cold, hard truths it reveals, without letting it seize the wheel and drive you into manipulation. To become the mastermind means becoming the conscious steward of your own deep psychology. It means accepting that your sensitivity was never a flaw. It was the raw, dangerous material required to forge a higher form of consciousness. Accept the coldness, the temporary apathy, and the surgical insight, for these are the fire and hammer needed for your final transmutation. See you in the next dimension.